Hey everyone, I'm Mary Beth McAndrews from Dread Central, and I'm here today with Teresa Palmer, the star of Shudder's new film, The Twin. Hello, how are you?
Hello, hello. Thanks for having me.
So, first off, how did you get involved with The Twin? How did you get involved with this project?
Yes. Well, I was approached by the filmmakers. So they sent the script to my agents, and then my agent called me and said, "Oh, there's something really interesting that's popped up." And it was while I was shooting the final season of A Discovery of Witches. So
Oh,
I was really looking for something cool and gritty and something that I could sink my teeth into performance wise. But I was hoping for a movie because shooting a TV show was 6 months and I really wanted to just pop into something for 2 months. I was also pregnant. So
oh.
I was like, what's something I could do quite short that means I won't have a massive belly? And this just landed on my lap. I read it. I was horrified and shocked, and it had one of the most amazing twists I've ever read. And I just knew, I was like, this is it, this is the one.
So, what was it like to film this movie while pregnant? Like,
Well,
not even
it
just
came with a,
physically, just like
yeah.
emotionally and mentally more than anything else.
It definitely came with its complications. Oh goodness, I mean, where to even start? Physically, it was okay because I didn't have to do a lot of stunts, and we did have a stunt double who went into the freezing cold water for me and things like that, which I wasn't allowed to do. But a lot of baggy jumpers. That's why you'll see that she likes to look very comfortable in the movie,
I
but
was gonna
really
say I loved her aesthetic of like very cozy, like big sweaters, but now I understand it was both an aesthetic and
yes,
hiding
and a
situation.
specific choice to cover the belly. We didn't think it would really lend itself to the story if this woman's like now pregnant with a new baby. So we decided we couldn't write the pregnancy into the story. But oh goodness, emotionally, it was very challenging because I was at that specific time in pregnancy where you're in your second trimester and you're starting to feel really good and your baby's moving and kicking for the first time. So you're having all these joy filled moments. And then the complete contrast to that is being in this nightmarish hell of the emotional drag, portraying a mother who has lost her child. So I really felt like a swinging pendulum. I would go from one extreme to the next. And it was really, really, really emotionally challenging. But I wanted to give it everything. I wanted to be so real in the feelings and carry the heaviness. And to do that, I had to just fully dive in and have those awful feelings of, wow, this is, imagine if this happened to my child. What would that feel like? And it's such an isolating experience, I think, for these women who I've read a lot of articles written by mothers who have lost children. And there's one in particular who I became quite close with who was very, very generous in her just in her giving and sharing of the experience. And one thing I really noted was that when this nightmarish event happens, this trauma happens to you, everyone bands around you and holds you up and lifts you and takes care of you. But as we know, the only thing that is constant is change. So eventually, the calls stop coming every single day, and the people there every single day, that stops, that starts to dwindle. But you are the central character in the nightmare. So for you, day in, day out, nothing changes. You carry the weight of the grief. And everyone else's life continues on, and then they've got school pickups and extracurricular activities, and you're just sort of stuck. And you're noticing in your family, you see the gap of where your child should be. You see the gap in the ages. You see, in this situation, my character, she has twins. She would always look at her remaining son and just be reminded of the son that isn't there. And it's just like an unfathomable pain. So that was very challenging, very challenging. And I had to come up with ways to put boundaries in place so that I wasn't carrying it over into my home life, because I was there in Estonia without my husband, having to, take care of 3 children, and I'm pregnant and I'm filming. Luckily, I had one of my best friends with me, but yeah, it was emotionally pretty rough.
Oh my gosh, that is a lot. So like, yeah, what were some of this like kind of boundaries and self-care stuff that you tried to do while you were on set?
Well, one of the things I had decided was Tristan, who plays my son in the movie, he is the same age as my oldest, Bodhi. So I sort of
Oh,
connected them and they became really good buds. They really hit it off. And every day Tristan would be like, could you bring Bodhi to set? So typically I'd be like, oh, I don't know. I'm not sure if set's really like the best place for him to hang out. But because he had his buddy Tristan there, I ended up bringing my son Bodhi to set with me almost every day. And Tristan and him would play and run around the property, this big creepy house where we were filming, and be on the playground and play hide and seek together. Having that light energy around constantly and being able to tap into being mum in between action and cut was really quite liberating. And what the response I was getting from the crew was that they all needed it too. They wanted the lightness. They were like, bring the kids. So we often would have the kids around set, and that would feel just so beautiful. It's just that nice sense of relief having them around. And then I wouldn't look at my script. I made a point of, I just don't look at the script. I don't think about the day. I really cut it off. As soon as I get my car, take my makeup off, I'm back to being mum. I do books and bath and bedtime. And I would only take my script out or start talking about work once they were all asleep. So that was really the way I did it. And I'm not sure I could have survived otherwise, or I just don't think it would have been healthy for my kids to have mum sitting in this like immense depressive state,
yeah.
especially because I was the only parent for them during that period of
Oh my
time.
God. You have 4 kids?
I
You
have
were
4. I was pregnant with my 4th
Oh
during that
wow. Oh
filming.
my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow, that's wow. Working for wow, that's incredible. But then you mentioned Tristan, who plays your son in the film. What was that like working with him and connecting with him in such a like you guys have some very emotionally intense conversations in this movie, especially at the beginning. And so what was it like working with him as an actor? And he is an actor himself.
He is, yeah. Tristan's a beautiful little boy, and his mum Edith and we became good friends actually. So, and they also have a little girl, and so my daughter and her daughter played together, and so really it was about like blending these families and becoming really close. So when we weren't at work, we were spending time together in Estonia and walking around, checking out the attractions and doing tobogganing with the kids. So that really helped solidify this relationship with Tristan. And I know that Edith really sort of handed the reins over to me to mother him on set, when in between action and cut, and while we were physically on set. She was obviously always around, but I was always looking out for him. I was always checking in with him and making sure emotionally he was doing okay, that he understood the scenes and why we were doing the things that we were doing. Because, being on set for a little kid, having to act in a situation like that, it could be quite confronting and quite scary. And I just wanted to hug him and keep him under my arm and make sure he was okay. And so I really took on that maternal role, which again lent itself to the dynamic between us on screen. And he felt comfortable with me picking him up and cuddling him and showing him affection, because we had spent so much time together as these two families.
Yeah. And so I'm also curious about the dynamic with Stephen Cree, who plays your husband, and you're obviously very tender with Tristan and your son, but then you and Stephen have a very tense relationship, and there are a couple lines where it's just like, ooh, icy, and appropriately so. But I'm curious then also what that was like with that dynamic between the two of you on set, and having this like very maternal relationship, and then having this relationship with him, and how that all worked and you balanced all of that as an actor.
Yeah, it's funny because Cree and I, we knew each other from a Discovery of Witches. So we had
Yeah.
just worked together, and we wrapped the season, and then he was going back to spend time with his wife and his daughter. And I was like, hey, so there's this project and they've just lost their lead guy. How do you feel about jumping on board? And he, was so beautiful and said yes, and all those lovely things. But him and I have a real camaraderie. We're always laughing. He has the funniest sense of humor. He's one of the most comedic people I've ever met. So we were always giggling on set of a Discovery of Witches. But then when we got here, I noticed a shift. I really noticed that we weren't doing a lot of that same banter. I think the material was heavier. There felt like a little bit more distance between us. And I think we both subconsciously kept that in place so that none of the sort of joy-filled connection that we have between each other, none of that would bleed into the film, because we needed to feel fractured. It's one of the center points of the story, and it's integral to this movie, is that it's broken. It feels really broken. So I think we probably put a bit more distance between us than we usually do on the set of Discovery of Witches, because that one's, we're very close friends on that show, and our characters have so much adoration for each other. But yeah, so it was really interesting. And we still have our long, deep and meaningful discussions and all that sort of stuff. But I think the jovial nature of our relationship sort of got put to the side so that we could really focus on how do we breathe life into these characters, and like, what does that feel like for these two people to be in such a damaged, broken place.
Yeah. And so you are very familiar with the horror genre. You've been in a plethora of genre projects. And so with The Twin, what made it feel different for you as an actor and as a performer taking on this project?
When I look at a horror film, I've never enjoyed a horror film that has the gimmicky horror. I really love those smart character pieces. So one of my favorite, Ari Aster is one of I dream directors to work with. One day I may have the privilege of working with him.
Manifesting. We're manifesting.
I am a big manifester girl. He's on my manifest board. But so I look at someone like that who builds a narrative first and foremost, and then adds the horror element to the strong narrative of, who are these characters, what are the dynamics between the people, the central characters. So I felt like that with The Twin. It just seemed like the leading narrative was a family dealing with the loss of their child and picking up the fractured pieces of their relationship. So that felt like the main heartbeat of this story. And then on top of it, they folded in these horrifying elements. And then there were themes of mental health in there, which I'm, such a big advocate for, and I'm very familiar with. And I loved that there was this woman who, in all her pain and isolation and grief, she was so raw and vulnerable. And it meant that as a performer, I was given the opportunity to try things without boundaries. I could really delve there because the lines between fiction and reality were a little bit blurred in our movie, that it just was such a gift as a performer. And that's what I was looking for. What is that amazing character? Like, where can I find that amazing character that I can sink my teeth into? And I felt like I got to have that on Lights Out many moons ago, when, again, at the core of the story was so interesting. If you take the horror element out, it was still such a watchable movie in and of itself. And then you get to feed all the horror back into it. That's why, I felt like Lights Out had a successful formula. And The Twin felt like that too.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today about The Twin. Everyone, The Twin is now available on Shudder, so please go check it out.
Thank you so much.